Ray. Ray pronouns are he, him from North Carolina who wants to talk about God and technology. Ray, you're on with Eric and Matt. How are you?
Hey, can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Well, sure deal. I've never been on any TV or anything. How's it going?
Okay. Your audio is a little mangled, but I can at least understand you. So what was it about God and technology that you were thinking about?
Well, let me switch rooms here, see if y'all can pick me up better. Well, hopefully this is better. If not, it's the best it'll get. Hello
I think we
Let's
can
just go
manage.
for it.
Yeah.
All right. So what I wanted to say was, well, first of all, I'd called in last week, and that was the first time I heard this show when I came across it. And I was listening, and to be completely honest, I was getting a little frustrated hearing what y'all had to say. It was you and that other gentleman. I'm sorry, I don't know the names. Like I said, I just ran into the show, and I think it was Matt. Well, so what I wanted to do was call in and give my perspective on the whole thing and see if I can change y'all's mind.
Sure, we're ready.
So what is it exactly? What is your problem with the whole idea of a God? I guess is where we'd start.
My personal problem with it may be slightly different from Eric, but my personal problem with the very idea of a God is that there isn't sufficient evidence to believe that it's true. And my second problem is that for most of the ones that have been proposed, even if they were true, I have a problem with the notion that any God or being could be, should be worthy of worship. But the only issue that I really need to address is it true? Because if it turns out it's true, then whether or not I care about worshiping a God is just my preference. But my problem with it is that there's not enough evidence to think that it's true.
And I'm in pretty much with alignment with what Matt just said. I've yet to be presented with compelling evidence that a God exists. So I have the same problem with God that I have with vampires and unicorns and any other mythological creature. It's just I don't think it exists. With the God, though, there's the added problem of lots of people believe that a God exists, and that's caused a lot of problems in our history. So kind of have like an added incentive to have issue with the whole God concept. But I mean,
Yeah, I have
overall,
loads of problem with various religions for sure.
yeah. But overall, just a general God concept, I don't have a problem with it. I just won't accept it as true until I'm compelled by evidence.
Yep.
Now, when you say there's no evidence, that I don't agree with. To say there's none at
Well,
all.
I don't think
I
either of
I
us said that.
yeah, I use my words very carefully there. I said there's no compelling evidence.
And I said there's insufficient evidence. Instead of trying to nitpick our words, considering this is your first time and I've done this for 20 years, why don't you just try to present evidence for God that you think should be compelling to us?
All right, fair. That's fair enough. And let me see how I want to approach this. I had wrote in the box about technology, and now I'm thinking if I present that, I don't think that's going to do the job.
That's
Which
probably the right call.
God,
If you don't think your evidence you're presenting is compelling, then yeah, I would probably not worry about presenting it.
for clarity, which God do you think is real? What do you know about that God?
Oh, I'm a Christian.
Okay. So what do you know about the Christian God and how do you know it?
Well, the Christian God I know from the Bible, from Scripture. I
Okay.
know from the teachings of the church. I know from my personal relationship. And I know from my studies of metaphysics, I know from, there's so many things that have revealed themselves to me, both in
Okay.
terms of knowledge and in terms of a personal relationship that I think goes beyond knowledge. I think if you
Does the
have
personal
personal experience, that trumps knowledge, because
does the
knowledge, you can study all you want, but it's a different kind of experience when you experience.
does your the personal relationship involve back and forth communication with God?
In the sense of, well, in the sense of I can pray, I don't hear a voice back per se.
How is that a personal relationship? Everybody I have a personal relationship with is somebody that I can communicate back and forth with. So I don't understand a personal relationship where there's one-way communication.
Yeah, for example, if I let's say hypothetically I never met my father, but I would write my father letters every week, but I would never get any correspondence back my entire life, but I keep on writing.
Oh,
I
let
wouldn't
me be
consider that a
clear.
personal relationship.
There's no communication in the sense of a voice in my head, is what I, let me be clear, but there is a communication through his actions and through his deeds.
I so what I'm talking about here is you said there's a personal relationship, um, and now you're saying that the communication occurs through his actions and his deeds. Can you name one action that God has taken that you can demonstrate was actually God taking an action?
Well, well, let me think here. I don't want to pull out the first thing, the first thing that comes to my head and get it shot down. I'd rather
Yeah.
take my time, because y'all on the other side are probably way more prepared than I am, and I'm just being honest.
Yep. No.
Fair enough.
All of that is probably correct. It's
To
you. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, Ray, while you're thinking about of your best example, because I can think of like just to put you kind of in my mind space, like back to my analogy where I'm writing letters to my dad every week, my supposed father that I've never met, he never talks back to me. I could maybe identify things that happen in my life that I might attribute to him, but I would have no way of knowing. Like, for example, if I find a $5 bill on the ground, I can go, "Oh wow, this is great! I bet my dad left this here for me." Or if I get
Well,
something in the
let
if I
me
get a
let me
present
hop
out of
in on that.
nowhere, yeah. Well, my point is
If you
before
had
you
if
counter
you
that,
had wrote your dad a letter asking for a $5 bill on the ground, and you found a $5 bill on the ground,
okay,
You think if I wrote my dad a letter asking for a $5 bill on the ground and I found a $5 bill on the ground, that would be sufficient evidence to conclude that my dad exists, heard my request, and fulfilled it?
well, I think it's a start. It don't
I
have to
didn't ask if
determine
it
the
was a
whole thing
start.
right there.
I didn't ask if it was a start. So you've claimed to have a personal relationship with God. I've asked about the nature of that personal relationship and if there's communication. And you say that God communicates through his deeds. And I've now asked you, what deed or act can you present that is confirmed to be from a God? Just one, because I'm not aware of any. And so, if Eric writes his dad and says, Dad, um, I love you, and I want you to please send me a special message. And Eric doesn't know who his dad is. He's never interacted with his dad. And he tunes into the nightly news, and an older gentleman is on the news, reading the news, and tugs at his ear. And Eric concludes that that man is his dad sending him a message. Does Eric have sufficient evidence to reach that conclusion?
I didn't understand the question, sir, and I'm just being honest. And maybe
Okay.
you can run it by
If
me one more
Eric
time.
if Eric sends a letter tries to send a letter to his dad that he's never met and says, I
All
need
right.
you to show me a sign that you love me. And while watching the news, an older gentleman tugs at his ear, and Eric concludes that that older gentleman is his father sending him a message. Is that a reasonable conclusion for Eric to make?
I would say no in that example because it's
Okay.
no.
And yet you say no, and I agree with you, and yet there's a real person there that's doing something. So if I were to ask Eric, hey, can you give an example of what deed or act your dad did that is confirmed to be an act from your dad? He could say, well, he tugged his ear on a show one night. And I was like, yeah, but I agree that person exists, but how do you know that's your dad? And he said, because he was answering my request for him to show stuff. Eric would be doing the same thing that many theists do, except that he'd be doing it with someone we know exists. You're doing it with someone we don't even know exists. And so I still am waiting, if God is communicating with you through his actions, why is it so hard to come up with one action that we can all confirm is from a God?
Well, I think the difficulty is when you are so critical on the other end and you're not looking to accept something, then I need to dig
Ray,
deep and find something that's
Ray,
really going to
Ray,
knock.
Ray. I'm asking you to present a piece of evidence to support your claim. Are you really coming back to say that it's difficult because you think I'm not willing to accept it?
No, I'm not saying you're not willing to accept it. I
Then
said it's
don't
going to
bring
be.
up how critical I am when I haven't been critical with you at all, but how critical I am is irrelevant to whether or not you can present one single example of a God doing anything. It's not my fault or Eric's fault that you can't do this. Maybe it's God's fault.
Yeah,
Well,
Ray,
well,
do you
let
have
me
do you
let
have
me
it? Do
run
you
this
have
by
an
you then.
you're
Okay.
right? Do you have an example analogous to the $5 bill thought experiment? Like, do you have
I
something
do.
similar to that? Okay, lay it on us.
So I had a dog a few years ago, and let me just give this to you quick. And he had been diagnosed with cancer, and we prayed on it, and we spoke to God on it. Come to find out, he had recovered, and we didn't need no surgery. We didn't need no anything.
Okay. Do you
All right.
understand that cancer sometimes is misdiagnosed and that cancer sometimes goes into remission?
Oh, I do, but you could have seen him. He was in the kind of shape that you wouldn't have any doubts looking at him, what he was
Well,
So
going through.
Ray, I would absolutely have doubts because I'm not a vet. Are you a vet?
I'm not, but we spoke to one.
Sure. And do vets always diagnose animals correctly?
I'm not sure if they do or they don't.
Well,
I
they
would
don't.
imagine.
They don't always get it right. Nobody gets it always right. But how did you rule out an incorrect diagnosis? What did you do to rule that out?
Uh, I just looked at him, and you could look at him and see what he was going through. And here's the thing: whether it was cancer or it was something else, he was in the kind of shape that he was ready to go within a couple weeks, a couple months.
Yeah,
so
Ray,
so Ray
I'm gonna
Ray
let Eric jump in because I'm about to cross over into non-Zen mode because it's incredibly frustrating for me to hear someone express so much confidence in the face of so much ignorance. And I don't mean that as an insult. I'm not remotely saying anybody's stupid, but neither you nor me are qualified to diagnose cancer in dogs. The vet may be, and the vet may or may not have gotten it right. And when I asked you what you did to rule out that it was wrong, which is only step one, because even if we have a correct diagnosis, cancer sometimes goes into remission. And even if there was cancer and the cancer went away, you have no way of demonstrating that it was a God doing that. So what you've done is you've said, here's a circumstance where I don't have enough information to reach a conclusion, but I'm going to reach a conclusion anyway. And then something happens, and you don't have any way of demonstrating that the conclusion you want to be correct, that God saved your dog, is true, but you're going to believe it anyway. That's an incredibly frustrating thing for me to deal with. And I think Eric probably has a different line of questioning or different path to go down that might be more helpful. So I'll leave it to Eric.
Yeah. So Ray, let's rewind back to the claim where you said that your evidence that you have a personal relationship with God is that you had a dog a few years ago. Uh, it
One
got
evidence.
cancer. Yeah, one line of evidence. You got cancer. You prayed and it recovered. For a moment, just pretend that you're incorrect about God did anything. Let's say God didn't do anything. In reality, God didn't actually help your dog recover. What other explanations can you come up with as to why your dog recovered? Matt gave you a couple. You can use those if you want, but just for
He
a
did,
fact,
he
just for a
did, and
moment, pretend.
I've never seen someone go from the shape that he was in to recovered. I've
Well,
never seen that
Ray,
personally,
all right,
which
well,
is why
Ray, answer my question
I go
though.
ahead.
All right, for a moment, let's say you know for a fact God didn't intervene for your dog. What other explanations would explain the phenomenon you saw?
Well, I think that's a flawed question because I could say,
No, it's
pretend
not.
for a moment that God did, that God did, and I could win the
So Ray,
argument that way. So I would
I
rather not
so
go
Ray,
down
this is not
that
an argument.
line of question.
Ray, all right, Ray, this is not an argument we're having here. I'm asking you for alternative explanations. I'm perfectly fine to put on the table that sure, it's possible a God intervened for your dog. I'm trying to determine whether that's likely or not. So we have one explanation that you put forward, and that's God did it. And I'm asking you what other explanations are on the table that we have not eliminated yet. Just give me one. Matt already gave you probably two, I think, if I remember correctly, but just you give me one. What's some alternative explanation?
All right, fair enough. I see what you're trying to get at. Uh, and I'm trying to
Like,
remember what the other gentleman said.
you don't have to remember what Matt says. Just give me one of your own. It's much better if it comes from you. So, for example, I got sick last week. I didn't really get sick last week, but let's say I got sick last week. I had COVID. I was on the couch. I was feeling like I was half dead. No prayer, just some rest and some medicine, and I got better. What's the explanation for why I got better?
Oh,
Did
but
God do it?
that's not.
It
You can't compare that to cancer.
Sure, you can. It's an illness. It's
You
analogous.
can't. You're not going to sit there on the couch and you're not going to take some Tylenol and wake up from cancer, and go to work the next day.
Let's say a year ago I had cancer. I was in the hospital. I had cancer, and before I even started treatment, it got better. What's the explanation?
Well, I think
Or
one thing I do know is that if you had just got it, it might not have grown. As far as I know, cancer grows and it might have stopped growing
ca- yeah,
and
cancer
it
both
might have.
grows and shrinks. Cancer both grows and shrinks. It's called remission. So, but here's the thing, though. Okay, I didn't pray to a god. I had cancer. I didn't pray to a god. Didn't appeal to any higher being or anything like that, and I just got better even before treatment started. What's the explanation? What's some possible explanations? Because whatever explanations you posit for my recovery can equally be applied to your dog. So, give me one alternative explanation other than a god.
I see what you're getting at,
Then answer the question,
and we're
please.
and we're assuming that you didn't pray,
I'm telling you, to didn't pray.
and that's the problem with the question because we don't know the alternate if you had prayed, and we can't
Ray,
test it that
Ray,
way.
Ray,
Ray,
So
you are missing
you
the
don't
point.
know,
Ray,
you never know whether other people prayed or not. Eric's telling you
Yeah.
he did not pray. If it is in fact the case that he did not pray, answer the question.
Just give me one alternate explanation other than God. Anything.
And let me, and I, and we've gone through a few of them, but let me add in this. You don't know if God will intervene
Ray,
without the
I've
prayer.
asked you, Ray,
You
I've
don't
asked
need
you
the
four
prayer.
times. Ray, I've asked you 4 times. This is my final time I'm asking you because if you don't answer it, I'm just going to tell you the answer because I'm trying to help you think for yourself here. What other explanation, anything that's possible, can you give me for my recovery from cancer? Anything.
I suppose it could have shrunk,
Remission,
but
spontaneous remission, right? That's what Matt said earlier.
you don't know if God's behind that or if he isn't.
That's the whole
Correct. And
point of this
So
neither do you,
conversation.
Ray, and
there's a
that's the
measurement
problem.
problem right
Neither
there.
do you. Neither do
Ray,
you, Ray, and that's the problem. We're not claiming to know whether or not God's behind it. You are.
so Ray, I'm going to lay it out for you very cleanly here, okay? Spontaneous remission happens. There's lots of people who get cancer, do not pray a single word to any God, and get better even before treatment starts. There are explanations such as misdiagnosis. Maybe the doctor mixed up x rays. Maybe the doctor mixed up blood tests and blood work, and they gave one patient's diagnosis to another patient. This stuff happens. These are all perfectly rational, even I would say common occurrences that happen in our world. We have 8 billion people on the planet. We have millions of doctors. We have millions of cases of cancer and other illnesses. These things happen. But then occasionally, this will happen with somebody who's religious. And instead of attributing the explanation to these natural explanations, they say a God did it. And that's without justification. So, getting all the way back to your dog here, how do you know that your dog didn't just spontaneously go into remission? How do you know that your vet didn't mix up x rays or blood work? How do you know you're just not misremembering conversations that happen and you're recalling it in a way that frames your God in a better light? How can we eliminate these natural explanations in order to accept your God explanation?
Because I'm taking it as a holistic. I'm taking every experience I got, not just the dog
Can
situation, but
you,
I'm taking it all holistically. And I'm
Ray, can you
understanding that the relationship with God exists in the same way if you write your dad and he's been answering you back, the next time you write him, you're not going to say, let me prove that
Ray,
this is my dad. You're going to assume that this letter
Ray,
that came from your dad's
Ray,
address is from your dad.
Ray. If somebody's been writing their dad and their dad's been writing them back, that's two-way communication. That is not what we discussed. You're writing your dad and your dad never writes back. Your dad may be dead. You have no reason to think that your dad exists at all anymore. You are writing letters to your dad. You are getting nothing back. And when your dog gets better, you
Anymore.
credit dad. When your dog gets better, you credited your dad without a single shred of evidence for it.
and Ray, when you say holistic, I imagine you're saying this is a preponderance of all your experiences. You've done stuff like this several times. This has occurred to you many, many times, and you have identified enough of these occurrences, like your dog losing its cancer without treatment. You're saying, oh, all bunch of these things have happened, and that gives me confidence. Gives me evidence that I need that a God exists. But my question, it covers all of that. Now we're into confirmation bias territory, possible confirmation bias. How do you know you're not just emphasizing the hits and ignoring the misses in your life? How many times have you prayed for something and it didn't happen? How many times have you prayed for something and the opposite happened? How many times have things go completely bad for you, completely sideways, and you just let God off the hook for those things? Like how can we possibly determine that this is actually a real line of evidence, or you're just picking and choosing and cherry picking your experiences in order to support your preferred conclusion?
Why did God heal your dog but not my grandfather?
And where did the cancer come from,
Well,
for that matter?
Yeah, why'd your dog
well,
get
I
cancer
don't
in the first place?
necessarily think
And
that
and why'd your dog get cancer in the first place?
I don't necessarily think that, you know, a God would have to heal everyone in order to heal
Of course not.
someone.
So fuck my grandpa. We need to heal your dog.
No, it's not. It's not.
Which
You
one
don't
is
got to
more
look at it.
valuable? Which one is more valuable, my grandpa or your dog?
Well, let me ask you this. Did you pray
No,
on
let
it?
me let you answer my question. Which one's more valuable, my grandpa or your dog?
I don't think it's about value. I think
Which one
you
is more
prayed on it.
valuable? Which one is more valuable, my grandpa or your dog?
Ray, if you were in a burning
I don't
building
think.
and your dog, Ray, if you were in a burning building, your dog was there and Matt's grandpa was there, who would you save? You can only save one.
If my dog and what was
Matt's grandpa.
And Matt, why is
Matt?
it so difficult for you to follow an incredibly simple question? The house is on fire. Your dog is in one room. My grandpa is in the other room. You have time to rescue one of them. Which one are you going to rescue?
Well, because I'm not familiar with the name. So when you say Matt's grandpa, I don't know Matt from Tom.
Okay.
But to
Matt
answer,
is the
No,
host of
hang
today's
on.
show. My name is Eric.
It's fuck that. Ray, listen to me. Who's more valuable, Matt's grandpa or Tom's grandpa or Susan's grandpa or Jennifer's grandpa? What fucking difference does the name make? It doesn't matter
well,
whose
that,
grandpa is in there. If there's a grandpa in one room and a dog in the other, which one are you fucking rescuing?
well, the question
Which
doesn't
one
have the
are you
details that you
rescuing?
need.
Ray, which
You
one
could
are
have
you
a Nazi
rescuing?
soldier,
Ray,
a Nazi soldier.
okay, I'm going to mute you because you might be the most dishonest fuck I'm going to run into today. And I'd rather not lose my zen too much because now you're suggesting that there might be a Nazi in the building. You dishonest son of a bitch, Ray. I'm going to ask you right now, a dog's in one room, a human fucking being is in the other room. Which one do you rescue? If you say anything other than dog or human being, you will never be allowed to call while I'm on the show again. Dog or human being, who are you rescuing?
Hello?
Dog or human being,
My,
who are you rescuing? Goodbye. We patiently went through this. Ray is incredibly frustrated by what he heard on last week's Sunday show. So he wants to call in for the first time ever and try to defend a God.
I caught that too.
Despite the fact that
Ray,
he called last week, he said.
yeah. Ray, I want you to reflect on that conversation and why answering very simple questions is so difficult. Because I suspect, Ray, that you are smarter than you just presented yourself. I think you can, once you hear the question, you know where the question is going, and you don't like where the question is going. That's why you accuse us of asking the wrong questions or asking dishonest questions or however you framed it, asking us
Being too critical.
being too critical. Like, Ray, you know where these conversations are going because you are a logical thinking person. And the fact that you are wanting to be dishonest like that, wanting to evade questions, wanting to kind of just block and kind of obfuscate the conversation with these tactics, it tells us a lot about you. It tells us that you prefer your conclusion more than actually getting to a conclusion based on evidence and truth. And it's very frustrating. Yes, when you're in a burning hospital, you're going to rescue the human. If all else being equal, dog and human that you know nothing about, you're going to rescue that human. At least I hope you would. And the fact that you can't answer such a question because you know that that's going to lead to, well, why didn't your God help this human and help your dog instead? Why did your God in that situation save the dog rather than the human? You know that's going to put you and your God in an awkward position, and you don't like that. And it's very, very frustrating. But reflect on that, Ray. See if you can ask yourself those questions when you're by yourself, when you're not in front of an audience, when you're not in front of two assholes like us, just drilling with questions. Ask yourself and honestly reflect about that, why you did this. Because I don't think a God that is real or a God that is honest or a God that is virtuous needs somebody to use these tactics to defend them.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jimmy Snow. I'm the executive producer of The Line. And at night, I sneak into Matt Dillahunty's house and I trade his cereals for other cereals. He comes out and he's like, wait, these are cereals I buy, but I swear I had different cereals. Anyway, would you like to support this channel or any specific show? You can do so over on Patreon or in channel memberships. There are special tiers for special shows or for the channel at large, and it helps us expand programming as well as hopefully very soon launch it in podcast form. Now, also, if you'd like to support, you can like, you can subscribe, you can leave a comment or a super thanks, which is a special highlighted comment that you pay for. Those are fun. And, screw the algorithm, go check out something over here, I suppose. Boy, I hope I can still put those icons there, because if I can't, this is going to look really stupid. I'm going to go buy some Cocoa Puffs and switch out Matt's mini wheats now.